you please let me know. Yeah, I believe it's starting. So I'm just sharing my screen. Okay. And one more thing, please don't hesitate to ask your questions. I will try to answer during the session, but if that's a pretty lengthy question and all, we can take that offline as well. Not an issue. So I believe it's visible for everyone. I want yes or no.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, well, the key agenda of this KT session is to talk about VSAN overview and what is VSAN prerequisites and what are the different configuration options available around VSAN policies and virtual machines on the virtual machine that we are going to apply, managing the operations in virtual SAN, monitoring and troubleshooting, stretched cluster, interoperability with vSphere features like how we can go ahead and we can enable or disable it along with vSphere, another features kind of HA or DRS. We should be pretty much clear on that. And we'll cover brief part of if in case you are going to plan and design the VSAN in customer environment, how you will do that. Okay. Well, I'm going to start from very basics. Probably you people are pretty much aware in vSphere environment, vSphere support multiple type of storage. Like one of them prominent is fiber channel, that is your FCSAN, that we represent as a traditional data store, and we can extend setting that on the basis of desire, and we can make number of LUNs, we say logical units, as a VMFS data store, right? Same way FCO is another categories of storage. Primarily we use for Cisco fabrics, iSCSI SAN, and direct attached storage. Direct attached storage is something referred that is directly connected with your hypervisor. That's primarily where we are going to install ESXi. That's referred as direct attached storage. However, we can add some another disk also, but from production perspective, enterprise perspective, we don't prefer to go with the direct attached storage, because somewhere we have to configure the vSphere cluster that requires some type of shared storage, right? And another category is your NFS storage. However, with NFS, if you are pretty much familiar, there is some limitations, kind of we cannot configure kind of RDM, or we cannot use it primarily where we need higher IOPS as compared to the SAN storage, right? So if we talk about VSAN, how VSAN is different as compared to the traditional storage that we are using, like in legacy environment, kind of FCSAN and all. So very first thing is VSAN is going to be reduced your storage fabric, just because of you don't want any additional virtual switch or additional storage switches to configure storage fabric and all, right? So what a virtual SAN is present in an aggregated storage that is available locally on each and every ESXi host that you are using in vSphere environment. So what it's going to do, it's going to collect, it's going to merge all these available storage and just present in a form of a single data store. Okay, like you could see there is available number of disks here, like these are the disks. So what it is going to do, it's going to merge all these disks and present these disks as a single virtual SAN shared data store. Okay, so very first thing we need to keep in mind while we are presenting VSAN data store always a single data store. So we cannot create multiple VSAN shared data store within your vSphere environment where number of sorry, is there any question? Okay, so
No.
yeah, that's fine. So it's always present as a single VSAN shared data storage. Okay, so simply if someone will ask you what is VSAN, so VSAN is a virtual SAN which is going to club your available local storage on your ESXi host and present in a form of a single data store that we referred as a VSAN shared data storage. And whatever we are going to store and all, whatever storage policy we have to apply, that all will be applied on this single VSAN data store. Okay. Well, moving ahead, within VSAN data storage, when we are going to present, I mean, we are going to select the storage. The storage could be there could be two mode. One is hybrid, one is all flash. So what it means hybrid and all flash? So it's a combination actually. So whenever we will create any kind of VSAN data store, a disk group is going to participate from each and every node. Okay. So in each disk group, there would be, so this is present as disk group. In each disk group, there would be always a cache drive, which will take care of your data read and writes. And there is another set of disk that's called as a capacity drive. Okay, so capacity drive is going to actually storing the data. So when we are making and when we are clubbing these storage in a form of VSAN data store, okay, so there is two mode. One is hybrid. So hybrid means my cache drive would be SSD drive and my capacity drive would be simple SSD drive. And another mode of these are all flash. So all flash always prefer where we need high IOPS, high data read and writes. Okay, so where my capacity drive would be SSD and my cache drive will also be an SSD drive. Okay, so all these, I mean, each and every host will make a separate disk group, and all these disk group club in a form of a data store. That's present is a single data store, right? So far, any question, guy? Just an basic.
Not yet. Yeah,
Fine.
we are fine.
Cool. Well, so how it works actually, how overall VSAN environment is work. If you will say like, boss, how I am going to configure the VSAN, how it will take the commands and all. Okay, so all my VSAN is divided into two things: control plane, all functionality control plane, and data plane. When we say the control plane is something from where I am instructing how my data is going to be write on the top of disks, that those are available inside the ESXi host. That all by managed by storage policy. So storage policy is kind of set of instructions how my data will going to write on the top of underlying physical disks inside the ESXi host. Okay, and my virtual data plane is something where actually data is going to be write. Data plane is something on the disk where actually my data is going to be written on the basis of whatever instructions I have provided by the control plane. To managing all VSAN functionality, my VSAN is an inbuilt feature within my ESXi hypervisor. We don't need separate console. It all will be managed through vCenter console only. Okay. So once you will enable the VSAN feature, there is a number of VSAN related services that would be available in vCenter console itself. You go ahead and you can configure and monitor whatever you want to do, right? Okay. Well, so when we starting to constricting the
Kuldeep,
yeah, yes, please.
sorry to interrupt. May you please
Yeah.
come again with the previous slide
Yeah.
and explain it in a better way, because I'm a bit confused between control plane and virtual plane.
No issues, no issues. So better to take me just one blank slide. Will that be good? Okay. So if I would say control plane is something from where I am instructing how my data will be written, right? Well, let me just change it as a pointer. So CP is something control plane, right? So control plane is something from where I am going to instruct how my data will be going to write on the top of available physical disks. Those are associated to my ESXi host, right? So whenever any VM, like for an example, there is a VM and you are going to store some data inside this VM. You want to write some data, so that will be written always some set of policies. So those are the set of policies. What are the set of policies? There is some rules being written on that policy. Maybe maybe there is some RAID policy, maybe some there dedupe and compression policy, maybe there's some encryption policy. So all these will apply on the control plane, right? So after taking all the instructions from control plane, when data will actually written here in the physical disk, right? So all these physical disks are part of data plane where actually my data is going to be written in a final stage. That's all my data plane, right? Is it clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, this group is something, the primary unit, like if I'll take again, I'll take back here. I'll take back here. So if I would say, if I'll take a simple architecture, how this going to be work, what actually this group is, and how it play the role in case of sorry, bear with me, actually there is some pointer issue always when we do it. So whenever we are going to construct a VSAN data store, from each and every host, there is certain disk that need to be participate, right? From each and every host, there is certain disk that need to be participate. It could be minimum 2 required for each, from each host, and they will make a logical group of disk. Out of them, some of the disk will present as a cache disk, and rest of the disk, always one disk would be cache, and rest of the disk will present as an capacity disk. So a logical grouping will be created for each and every host, and that group is called disk group. Okay. So how many disk group we can create or within VSAN data store? Yeah, well, there is some limitations always. Within if I'll talk about a single disk group can have one cache drive and one cache drive and 1 to 7 capacity drive. 1 to 7 capacity drive. Okay, it could have minimum 1, or it can go up to 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, my drawing is not so good, please bear with me. So the main thing, we have to understand the concept. One cache drive, 1 to 7 capacity drive always. Okay, can we have multiple disk group within single host? Yes, we can also have the multiple disk group within single host, but my hierarchy and distribution should be always equal. It should not be like that one host have one disk group, another host have two disk group. It's not a good practice. Anyway, VSAN will not identify. The configuration should be always homogeneous for each and every host. Which host is participating in VSAN VSAN cluster, or I would say finally it's going to create the VSAN data store, right? So how many disk group we can create? How many disk group we can create per host? 5, right? So it could be one disk group, two disk group, 3 4 5. Then if I'm going to create 5 here, then this 5 number should be equal for each and every host, right? So here in this example, you could say in each disk group there should be at least one cache drive and one capacity drive. Okay, and how many capacity drive it could have? 1 to 7, and maximum 5 disk group per host. Whenever each and every host is going to be participate to build an VSAN data store, all these numbers should be same, each and every host, right? Are we clear on it?
Kuldeep, so just we are taking an example on ESXi host 1, we are having five hard drives,
Yeah.
and host 2 we are having 7, right?
Yeah.
So as per our understanding, one will be used as a disk group, or we can say cache drive, and
Absolutely.
remaining we can create a capacity. So is it possible to have the same count, or it may be differ? It means for host 1, we are having only 4 drives. Out of 4, 1 is used as cache drive, and from remaining 3, we are creating a capacity, right? And on host 2, we are having 5. Out of 5, 1 is used as cache, and remaining 4 is used as a capacity drive. So will it will be a good idea, or might be?
No. It's never possible because
Okay.
of
So we have to have the
architecture of
same count.
VSAN. It's going to be distribute the data equally on each and every host. That's why it's a recommendation. Always when we are creating the disk group, there should be always same count of disk on each and every host what we are going to participate. Right?
Okay, it means it is a prerequisite that we have
Absolutely. This is one
equal
of the
number of
mandatory
disks on
prerequisites.
each ESXi, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I say homogeneous. Why? There is a logic, because it's not like a RAID concept or like that we are going to use, because it's going to my VSAN write the data equally on each and every host, so that in future, as per the storage policy, it can easily maintain the fault tolerance if in case any host goes down, or the just because of equally distribution of data. That's why it's a recommendation. Always we should go same number of disk group, and also within this group same number of disks, right?
Got it.
Yeah. And primary thing is cache drive, like where we say any of the drive, just we are referring here as in cache drive. It 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 is not mandatory, it's always equal to the capacity drive. My what VMware recommend is, you whatever the total capacity you are taking, like for an example, you are taking out of these 4 disk 100 TB is capacity, then this should not this like if I'll say 100, then it means that 25 25 25 this space could be only 10%. My cache should be available at least 10%, whatever the capacity I'm planning for that particular disk group, right? Are we clear on it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So cache drive is, my cache space is 10%, should be always 10% out of my total capacity drive what I'm using in each disk group, and each and every disk group together finally it's going to create a single vSAN data store. Again, I'm repeating, we cannot create, VMware does not provide us facility to create and establish the multiple vSAN data stores so far. Okay, so where we say a disk group can be hybrid, a disk group can be an all flash. So when we say hybrid, it means that my cache drive would be SSD and my capacity drive would be can be HDD. While we say the all flash, it means that my cache will SSD and my capacity will SSD. So probably now you are available SSD cost is not too much higher, so that we preferably we go for the all flash drive always, right? So because vSAN is not a new technology, it's in the market since last more than 5 years. So earlier SSD drive was a bit costlier as compared to the simple HDD drive, but now cost perspective there is not much difference, so people always go with the all flash drive, right? So that's an best example that you are seeing on the screen. There is 5 disk group we can create each and every host, and each disk group we should have one cache drive and up to 7 capacity drive. So this is the picture of one host. So for example, if we are taking a 10 host cluster, so per host I am getting how many disks? Capacity perspective 35. So if for the maximum strength, if we are going for 10 hosts, it could be 130. So disk size perspective, there is no limitation. You can choose any size of disk, but yeah, we should always keep a ratio between cache and capacity. Cache should be, we should available at least 10%. However, it's more than 10%, that is okay. But yeah, at least 10% cache we need, right? Cool. Yeah, that's again a same example where we are saying cache and cache is SSD, and again my capacity is also SSD. Okay, so all these disk group together create a single vSAN data store. Probably you could see virtual vSAN cluster here. It's going to show the, but when you will see the size, actually the size would be shown only the capacity size, right? Not for the cache, because cache is just maintaining the cache, because you are not actually writing any data in cache. Cache is just data in and write and giving you some buffer of space, just increasing the performance of your cluster, and finally it's going to be land on this. So probably you could see a 222, the final capacity is going to be approximately 6 TB, right? Okay, well, where we talk about prerequisite perspective, what do we need? So for a moment, just leave it concept. So here, so first of all, we need at least one SSD drive that's going to maintain that data cache. At least one, why I'm saying minimum as per one data store, right? And at least one, even says even your SSD drive or HDD drive, and one NIC card that support 1 GB, but best practice say VMware say you should go with the 10 GB when you are going with the all flash drive, right? And you require a inbuilt RAID controller within your ESXi hypervisor. So when you going to set the RAID controller, as it on RAID 0 mode or in a pass-through mode, that is something you have to do in a setting in the BIOS of your ESXi if you wants to configure your disk future for the VSAN purpose. So these are some mandatory requirement from network perspective, what we need. Okay. And if we come in a vSphere space, how we are going to leverage this network, you have to create one separate VM kernel port. Probably you are aware why we use VM kernel. There is another things also, vMotion, FT and all. Same way, for managing the vSAN traffic, you have to create a separate VM kernel port each and every ESXi host where you are going to provision your VSAN data store, right? So these are the minimum prerequisites to build and configure VSAN on each and every ESXi host level. Okay. Well, so what is VSAN object? So VSAN object is nothing, just what we are saving, what we are storing on the top of finally on inside the VSAN data store. Those all called the VSAN objects. So like it could be your any VM name, VMDK file, snapshot file, virtual memory file. Okay, all these things are called VSAN objects, right? And all these objects further divided into the components. We'll talk in when we will talk about storage policy. We'll talk like every object could have multiple size. Like if I'm writing any VMDK, it could be a chunk of 5 MB data or maybe more than that. So further, this chunk, whatever object I'm writing, it could be VMDK or whatever, wherever I'm writing the data, it is further dividing into component, and this component is going to be stored inside the disks in a form of storage policy that we are going to discuss in upcoming slides. Well, so from network perspective, what we just talked about, for the preparation phase, it's mandatory for you to create a VM kernel port each and every host and dedicate that VM kernel port just an vSAN traffic. Probably you will see when you configure the VMK, you will get a big list, vMotion, FT or vMotion. Just check for that VM kernel port. I'm going to use this particular port for vSAN purpose, right? And don't get confused, like if there is multiple vSAN data store or maybe 3 or 4, does not matter. Each host should have at least one VM kernel port to manage vSAN traffic, right? And if in case we are using the all flash array, it's always recommendation we should map this particular VM port with a physical NIC that have 10 gig of network bandwidth, because vSAN produce the huge amount of traffic whenever you are in process of data writing or reading on the top of your virtual machines. Okay, so that's how it works. On each and every host, we have to create a VM kernel port and we have to associate it with respective physical NIC. Okay, so from physical NIC policy perspective, that there could be 2 NICs, that's not a matter, but yeah, there should be one active and one is standby. Probably you are much better know from me like how the NIC teaming policies and all its work, right? Okay, so that's how it looks in distributed switch. And again, you have to create a VMK if you are using distributed port group, and you have to assign the VMK with that particular port group within distributed virtual switch. Okay, so these are some ports we have to be taken care, like from transfer perspective. If in case, I don't believe so anybody use the firewall within ESXi, but if in case some firewall in between ESXi, we have to take care all these ports should be turned on and enabled. Okay, so object, so where we could see the object, how it's going to be created. It's simple. You people keep on browsing every day the data store and you see different form of files. There is some VMDK, some swap file, some memory file, right? Some log files as well. So same way, you go particular VSAN data store, select your VM, and inside the VM, you will see the different type of directories are available. So all these are directories are presenting different type of object. VMDK is presenting kind of virtual hard disk, it is RAM, right? It is storage state or configuration file, all these log file. All these are some examples of the objects. Those are going to be stored within particular VSAN data store. Okay, so what I said previously, each and every object is split into components further on the basis of whatever policies we have configured. For an example, I will take just any object which have a size of 5 MB data here. So whatever storage policy we have applied, like for an example, we have applied policy RAID 1 within my VSAN data store. So definitely it's going to create the 2 copy of 5 MB and it's going to store on separate host, right? It could be a RAID 0 policy. So if just for an example, there is RAID 0. RAID 0 will always create 1 copy. It could be RAID 5. So my data will be right like this. These 2 data maybe 1 parity, right? So it's all depend upon whatever storage policy we have configured. Object further divided into component, and these components are going to store on different ESXi host on the underlying physical capacity drive what we are using. Correct? Yeah, this is just one example. Again, on the basis of policy, that's going to be stored the component. Each for one component, a maximum size could be 255 GB. So if your component, I would say length or maybe the weight is going beyond than 255 GB, then it's going to further split that component into another size. Like for an example, there is 500 GB of size my component. So it could be 255 plus, I believe there would be 250 or something like that, just a division of that. And it's going to split into 2 components, and further these 2 components will be stored on a form of whatever storage policy we have configured. Are we clear so far? Any question?
All good, Kuldeep.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
Kuldeep, is there any limitation for what is the maximum hard disk space
No,
can
disk
be
size
used?
is as per your choice.
Okay.
Yeah, so like if someone say like I want to take 1 TB of this, no problem. So it's only, it could be a better ratio of your cache drive and your capacity drive, right? So always when we choose the cache, it should be 10% of it, right? Disk perspective,
Okay.
there is no limit, right?
So there is no any limitation that it doesn't goes beyond 1 TB or 2 TB or 3 TB. There
No
is no
problem. It's not a problem. Limitations only on the disk group. 5 disk group you can create, and each disk group can have up to 1 cache and 7 disks so far.
1 cache and 7 disk. Okay.
7
1 disk.
capacity. Yeah, 1 to 7. So it means that if one host will have 5 disk group, it means that per host you are at least you are utilizing the 35 capacity drive. It could be 1 TB each, then it will go approximately 35 TB storage you are achieving from single host. So it's a good amount, I believe. So right.
Yeah.
So from a storage policy perspective, we'll talk in detail. So whatever storage policy we are going to configure within VSAN data store, that are not going to apply on the top of physical disk directly. That's the beauty of VSAN. We can configure multiple storage policies together within single VSAN data store, and we can apply manually even on each and every object. This group, I think we moved back. So storage provider, just an by default, whatever storage provider we are taking, that's provide the sufficient drivers for you, like kind of VSA, vSphere storage provider drivers. Well, witness, what actually witness in VSAN? So whenever we are going to configure the VSAN data store, we are participating 2 or 3 nodes. So it's always configure one node as an quorum node. So quorum is nothing, just for vote for your VSAN cluster. For example, I'm just storing some data in form of RAID 1 policy. It's going to be stored on 2. Because RAID 1 is always created 2 copy of your data, then one node will treat as a witness. So what this witness will take care, if there is any failure will happen, it will further going to rebuild your component probably on next available ESXi host, right? So how it's going to manage the failure in case of anything, any failure happen in case of we are applying the mirroring, or in case of we are applying the RAID 1 storage policy within my VSAN data store.
Kuldeep, I have one
What will be
question.
the
So
case if we have only 2 ESX node? Kuldeep, can we create a VSAN data store?
With the 2 ESXi, you want to create the VSAN data store? Yes, you can create,
Yeah.
but for that you have to configure another somewhere a witness site.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So we
finally,
need to
the count
configure
should be
a
3.
virtual machine for that, or virtual appliance. What will be the?
Yeah, this could be your virtual appliance as well. Not a problem. It is a physical host itself. Within this physical host, a virtual appliance is going to be deployed that will work for you as a witness.
Okay.
Yeah. Another
yeah,
question?
So as you mentioned for step 1, right, the RAID 1, where we'll have a 2 copy. So as well as do we have that 2 copy in RAID 0?
No, RAID 0 is always single point of failure.
Oh, okay. Got it. Mirroring, right?
Absolutely. RAID 0 is not mirroring actually.
Oh, sorry.
CT1, RAID 1 is mirroring.
Stripping.
Okay.
Got it.
RAID 0 is stripping and RAID 1 is mirroring.
Mirroring.
Okay.
Correct. Well, within RAID 1, the beauty of VSAN is within RAID 1, you can get multiple failure to tolerate. So these terms are going to frequently use failure to tolerate, FTT we say, right? So when we say RAID 1, I'm going to discuss little details in this policy. But for your example, like if somewhere we have configured RAID 1 with FTT2, it means that we are maintaining 2 failure. It means that whatever data I'm writing here, it's going to create 3 copy. So if it's going to create 3 equal copy, then we have to maintain 2 witness, because we have to maintain 2 parallel failure one time. Okay. But in this example, my consumption will going to be 300% as compared to previous one where we are going just 2 copy, right? So normally people don't use the RAID 1 with FTT2 just because of that there is huge space loss. As compared to this, people go for the eraser coding like your RAID 6 concept, right? Because they are going to achieve the 2 FTT there as well. Dedupe compression.
So in sorry to interrupt you. So in FTT, so how much space we are going to use, as you mentioned in FTT, where we are going to achieve almost 300 GB, 300%, sorry, right?
Yeah, it's your RAID 1 with FTT2. So it means that if I am writing 10 GB of data, it's going to consume 10, 10, 10, 30 GB.
Okay. And what about RAID 1? In same way?
Yeah, it's
FTT1.
It's mirroring with FTT2.
Okay.
If your mirroring is with FTT1, means that there is 2 copy.
Okay.
Okay. There is 2 copy. Then your data is going to be 200%. It means that if you are writing 10 GB of data, its total consumption is 20 GB. If I am going with FTT2 policy as mirroring, it means that you are going to consume 300% of data, 30 GB if I'm writing to the 10 GB, right? So this is previous example of FTT1, you could say minimum strip per object is 1, and the next example is FTT2, right? Where we want to tolerate 2 failure one time. Okay, dedupe is compression is one of the service of VSAN that we can enable. That's definitely is going to save your storage, and probably you are aware what actually dedupe and compression is. Wherever my data, my duplicate copy of data, it's going to convert as a single copy, and in that way, it's going to save your storage in some way, right? That is just one of the feature, right? So configure for each and every host where you are going to, configure the VSAN cluster. It's very simple. Just go there and enable the virtual SAN traffic for that, and just put IP address and configuration for that. Okay, so physical network teaming perspective, when we go ahead and we just configure the network, so it could be because it's a VM kernel port, it's a virtual port, right? It could be associated with two NICs where we can configure the NIC teaming policy as well as kind of active or standby in this way, right? One of the NIC could be active, one could be standby, or both NICs could be active, does not matter for you, right? Because both NICs could be active, one NIC's got failure, then traffic will continue from another NIC. It's all depend what kind of NIC teaming policy you have configured. Okay, well, for enabling VSAN, how we are going to enable the VSAN? Very interesting thing. First of all, you have to keep in mind, don't turn on any HA feature when you are turning on VSAN. Disable HA. First turn on the sequences. First turn on VSAN, then HA. When you are disabling, turn on HA, turn on when you are disabling, turn off HA, then turn off VSAN. So how you will enable it? What is the prerequisite we have to keep in mind? On the physical host, what I told you, and a VM kernel port should be configured. And the primary thing we have to keep in mind, MTU, right? MTU, that's you configure on distributed switch or virtual switch, and top of rack switch you are using, MTU should be matched. Like for an example, if top of rack switch are supporting MTU 1500, then my VDS by default MTU is 1500 itself. But if in case on top of rack switch we have configured MTU other value, kind of 9000 is the maximum MTU that support for layer 2 traffic, then for VDS switch also you have to configure 9000. If there is some mismatch, your cluster will be created, but unfortunately you will not able to see all the disks because hosts will not communicate with each other over VSAN traffic, and they will not identify their neighbor what's happening there. So your VSAN data store will show only the capacity of only single physical node. So MTU is matter here. Best practice recommendation, say from VMware side, if you'll go with the 9000, then you will get the maximum bump up and maximum benefits of using the vSAN data store. Otherwise, with 1500 MTU, it's always good. Hope you guys are aware from where in distributed switch we set the MTU. It's simple, go to distributed switch property and check the MTU, and it should be matched with your top of rack switch. So enable, just turn on. Once you will turn on the VSAN feature, it will ask you selection of disk, add disk in storage. If you will do it automatic, so it's going to pick the available disk, the smaller disk size as an cache disk and the bigger disk size as an capacity disk, and it's going to create a single disk group. But if in case disks in count you have two cache with a smaller size and more than 7 capacity disk, it's going to create two disk group for you, right? If you will select manual, it means that you go ahead and you just choose which disk I need to use for capacity and which disk I need to use for the cache drive. That's all options are available when you are going with the vSAN configuration, ESXi host. It will present as a disk. From there you can choose them as well. Well, dedupe is compression. That is something you can enable during the enablement, or you can keep it as disable. And there is another number of supported services are available. Dedupe, compression, encryption, number of things are available there. So you can turn on those features later as well. Okay.
So will it affect any VM performance if we enable the compression?
Well, sir, dedupe compression have specific use cases where we need to enable it. It's not mandatory to enable for each and every cluster. Wherever it's giving us advantage, similar kind of the prominent example is your VDI. So if we are making some cluster for VDI perspective, go ahead and just enable dedupe and compression. Definitely you'll get a benefit. But somewhere if we'll talk about the use cases where we are going to storage kind of databases or maybe exchange server where the frequent data in and out, and we don't have too much kind of duplicacy in the data, then it's not a good use case to enable the dedupe and compression.
Okay.
Yeah.
For high IOPS VMs, we should not enable it.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. And where we have kind of VDI, this kind of environment, we can enable. Well, this is just one snapshot from where we can claim the disk, which disk we should use for which tier, right? Probably you could see here the disk I'm picking for cache. It is just an example. Cache is a smaller size, and maybe we are picking the disk for capacity is the bigger in the size. Yeah, this is again a selection, how we are going to select the disk. But again, keep in mind, we have to, every disk is by default present as an do not claim. If you are going to select manual, every disk is present as an do not claim. First, you will convert it to kind of how I'm going to claim this disk, cache or capacity. So you have to on the basis of your selection, it will do. It will pick the disk. This particular disk will be used as a cache disk, or this particular disk will use an capacity drive. Okay. So one thing we have to keep in mind when we are going, sometimes what we have seen issue when we are going to claim the disk, we are not able to see the disk here in this section. So there is couple of regions, maybe that particular host being used earlier, used as an VSAN disk or something. So first of all, individually log in on that particular ESX site, go there and select the disk and remove the VSAN configuration for those disks, or maybe you need to restart that particular host and bring that host back. Then that point of time you would be able to see that particular disk. Whenever you are going to onboard any of the host in VSAN cluster, log in individually, check that it is showing all the disk in a pretty well manner, and there is no VSAN data store being configured on that particular host. Okay. So in this way, we can claim, yeah, these are the disk group we can create. This is the important thing that we need to understand. Even we have discussed few things already. Storage policy based management. Well, storage policy based management is going to plan, or I would say how we are going to plan how my data is going to be stored inside all these disks. For that we have to define certain storage policies, right? So what all type of storage policies as of now supported on VSAN? So the very first one is your, what we say is FTT, failure to tolerate one with RAID 1. Second could be FTT2 with RAID 1. What it means? Third could be your eraser coding. What? Eraser coding. Under eraser coding, we have two set of policies, RAID 5 and RAID 6. Okay. So these are the policies. Even with the RAID 1, we can go with FTT3 as well. But it's not a, I mean, you can go up to 12 even, does not matter. But it's going to be create number of duplicate copies, and you will not get storage efficiency at that point of time, right? So when we say RAID here, any kind of RAID, it's not the RAID that's going to apply on disk level. No, it's a set of policy only. That set of policy will apply on the top of your objects, and it's going to be store your data. So if I would say FTT1 RAID 1, what it means? Yeah, so this is the one. If I would say FTT1 RAID 1, it means that whatever data I'm writing within VSAN data store, that's going to create the 2 copy of my data in equal size. For example, it's 10 GB again. So it's going to consume the 10 GB and 10 GB. And there would be third would be witness that will take care of any failure to rebuild the component in future, right? So like I said, the FTT value could be from 0 to 3. So if same example, I would say FTT2 with RAID 1, it means that whatever data I am going to write, it's going to create 1, 2, 3 copy of that. One is original copy and two is the two mirror copy. And to maintain this hierarchy, it required 2 additional witness, right? So in this case, there should be at least 5 hosts that we need, right? Somewhere I am getting more redundancy as compared to FTT1 RAID 1 because we can manage 2 failure at single time, but definitely it's going to reduce my capacity because it's going to take the totally 300% of the total storage what we are going to consume. Correct? That's the example of strip. That's we say like if you want to maintain FTT2, then it's going to create 2. So stripping size is again matter within single RAID. If you want to split under this, we can make 2 strip or maybe we can make 4 strips. So it's not a good practice to create multiple striping within RAID because RAID 1 itself creating the 2 strip and 2 replica with the default policy, right? Well, where we talk about eraser coding. So how eraser coding is different as compared to simple RAID or mirroring concept. So if I would say another policy is, yeah, here we were talking about the policy, right? Under eraser coding, can I take some blank slide here? Yeah. Okay, let me take here. Under eraser coding, we have 2 sections, RAID 5 and RAID 6. So if we talk about RAID 5, it means that it going to create 1, 2 data, 1 parity. Okay, in this way. So RAID 5 always support only FTT1. It means that failure to tolerate 1. With RAID 5 eraser coding, we can only tolerate 1 host failure at a time, right? But if in case we use eraser coding as RAID 6, it going to create minimum 4 for you and 2 for failure for the failure tolerance. It means that data parity. So configuring the FTT2 with RAID 6 eraser coding, RAID 6, we have to require minimum 6 nodes, right? And wherever for configuring the FTT1 with eraser coding RAID 5, it recommends you to keep 4 data parity. In case of we are configuring eraser coding, we don't require separate witness. Because of that, my parity is work here kind of witness for you, right? So whenever we need, we have to configure FTT2, better to go eraser coding RAID 6 as compared to FTT2 RAID 1. Because of that, FTT2 with RAID 1 is going to consume more storage space as compared to FTT2 what we are using with RAID 6, right? Well, this is just a brief of comparison how we can apply different set of policies. If I would say FTT0, it means that no consumption, it required minimum 3 hosts. Why 3 hosts? Because to maintain the failure as well. Again, FTT1, it's going to consume two times of space. You require 4 nodes. Why we say 4? 2 is going to maintain the dual copy of your data. One is witness, right? One is for your witness, and and another next one is for your maintaining the redundancy. If in case any host will get failure, the copy will get created there, right? For RAID 5, you require 6. It is the minimum recommendation from VMware. However, you can go with 4 nodes as well. And this configuration, you can go with 3 nodes, does not matter, but you will not get the redundancy after any of the host will get failure, right? And with this, if we want to maintain FTT3, it's going to, okay, so yeah, so if in case this is eraser coding, it's going to take 1.3 of space, and if it is eraser coding with RAID 6, it's going to take 1.5. So its simple meaning is, if in case we want FTT2 better to go with RAID 6 as compared to we simply go with mirroring, because in mirroring it's going to consume more space 3 times, but here 1.5 times, right? Same thing you are achieving here. So better to go with the eraser coding RAID 6. Now the question comes in picture. Kuldeep, that's fine. We do understand what is RAID, what is this all, right? How we are going to take advantages in case of we have to apply? What is the recommendation? What is the best practices? How we'll go and apply that, right? So let me just take one empty slide here. That's an interesting thing. Suppose for an example, I was already consuming a VSAN data store. Hey, man, just one moment. Huh? I was having a VSAN data store already, and on that VSAN data store, okay, so before that, what is the default VSAN policy apply when we create any VSAN data store? Well, the default VSAN policy is FTT1 RAID 1. Keep in mind always, right? Now you say, Kuldeep, okay, so there was some of the VMs were already there which were using this policy, but now I want to update my VSAN policy for this particular data store. Okay, what you want? You said, Kuldeep, now I want it should be FTT1 with RAID 5. I want some space optimization. So what will happen? You will create a new storage policy with FTT1 RAID 5. You will apply it with this VSAN data store. You will apply this VSAN data store. That is fine. So what happened with my existing object? Those are there. So you only create a new policy, apply this policy on this VSAN data store. But what will happen on this existing component? Will this policy is going to affect these existing component? Then my answer is no. Till I will not change this manually, it will not affect. Still, all these my old legacy components are following up this FTT1 RAID 1 because this policy is already exist here, right? But when probably you can, you can hide your camera. So what we need to do? We have to go individually for all these VMs and update the policy, right? Am I clear? Are we in sync? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So now you could say, Kuldeep, I have these 50 VMs. Boss, मुझे ये 50 VMs के लिए चाहिए FTT1 RAID 1 just because these are my performance load. I have another set of VMs. These are not too much performance. I want FTT2 RAID 6. Is it possible? I would say yes, it's absolutely possible. But how? So before coming on this scenario, first of all, I want to tell you where we should use RAID 1, where we require the performance and high ops workload, kind of DB exchange. We always prefer to go with RAID 1. The workload which is not required too much performance, we go with eraser coding. Reason is being eraser coding always have some parity workload and it will impact the performance in read IO operations. So where we required high performance workload, we always prefer to go with RAID 1 with FTT1, and the workload which is not pretty much performance agnostic, we prefer to go with eraser coding, kind of RAID 5 or RAID 6, right? Now question came, how I can apply different set of policies on one time on a single VSAN data store. On this VSAN data store, one time I can only apply one policy. That's true. That's not false. But if I have different, I have made this policy, I have made this policy, I can go ahead, I can select these 50 VMs. Okay, I can select this set of 50 VMs and I can apply this policy. That's not a problem, right? On this data store, what is policy apply right now? Whatever data I will write by default, a new data, like I am creating a new VM. So it will go here. as per this policy, as per default apply policy on this VSAN data store, right? But if in case I have already running 50 VMs and I want, Kuldeep, I don't want the default policy FTT1 RAID 5 for these 50 VMs. I want FTT2 RAID 6. No problem. You select those VMs, right click, update the policy. But in future, whatever data will be right under these 50 VMs, they will follow this policy. So in this way, we can achieve to set different, only policy should be available. That would be, in beginning we have seen some slide, control plane and data plane. That all will be taken care by your control plane. One time, whatever policy you have applied on that particular VM, that will keep on continue following that particular policy. However, on single data store, we can only apply one data store level. We can only apply one storage policy at one time. By default, whatever new VMs will be created, those VMs will follow this currently applied policy. Clear? Or second question is how we are going to update. It's simple. When on data store level, you are going to create new VSAN storage policy, just apply that data store. Two things, two use case comes in picture. One is, do you need to change the policy for the existing one? So you have to do it manually. Until unless you will not do it manually, it will not take the change immediately for the new policy. Not immediately, until unless you will not change it, it will keep on following up the older one. Second thing comes, can we create different set of policy and apply different set of VMs? Yes, absolutely. It's your freedom. You can create n number of storage policies and you can apply on different set of VMs together. Are we clear? Because this is some interesting thing.
Yes.
Sometimes it's tricky also, right? Okay. Cool.
Okay, sir.
So in sorry to interrupt you. So in this case, as you mentioned that if we create initially one policy, right, FTT1 and FTT1, right, RAID 1. So we have
default
deployed
policy is FTT1 on RAID 1 on each data store when you're
Right.
creating the VSAN storage.
Right,
data
but
store.
right, but however, I want to replace this policy with FTT2 with the reserve coding. So can we do that from
Absolutely,
scratch?
that's what I told. You
Okay,
can
got
create
it.
number of policies from policy engine in your vCenter server. You go ahead and you can apply, right?
Okay, okay. So that will be replaced that FTT1 RAID 1, right?
That will replace, but that will not replace the policies of existing VMs in that one. That's what I'm telling,
Okay.
right? Suppose by default my policy is FTT1 RAID 1 and till now you have 50 VMs here. Then you say, boss, I am going to create a new policy. FTT1 RAID 5. You have created, you have applied on this VSAN data store, but for these 50 VMs, all these following this policy. Until unless you will not go manually and you can select all these 50 VMs, change storage policy, they will keep on running on here. FTT1.
So could it, if we are changing the policy, storage policy from the default to the customized one, for example, FTT2.
Yeah.
So will it impact anything at the VM level?
Well, sir, in backend, there would be some performance impact, but the recommendations from don't go with 10 or 15 VMs at a time. Don't select all the VMs together. Okay. In backend, it will keep on desyncing the data because it's replacing the policies. But yeah, it's always recommended whenever you are going to change.
So it's an online activity.
It's online activity. There would not be any downtime, but yeah, there would be a minor performance impact. End user will keep on working.
Okay, if some high sensitive application is running, so we should,
better to do as the off peak hours for those applications.
Yeah, and we should inform the
respective team as well, right? And don't take more than 5 to 10 TB data one time. Just do a high level of mathematics. Okay, cool. Well, maintenance and perspective, how we do a maintenance of VSAN cluster. Whenever any host we do patching or something like that, there is 3 options when we are evacuating any host from the VSAN. ensure accessibility, it means that it will move the object to active virtual SAN storage another nodes. Full data migration, it will completely evacuate your node, but full data migration typically we don't prefer. We only prefer full data migration in case we want to permanently remove that node from the cluster. Okay, and no data migration, for that time you will get some warning or some alert in your cluster. So best practice is always when we put any host in maintenance mode, go to ensure the accessibility, right? And put the host into maintenance mode, bring it that back, and it will start to resync the data from the place where it left. Well, it is just an simple LED indicators that you could see in your environment. Resync the component, and well, when we do any policy replacement or something like that, by default it will do it complete activity in next 1 hour. But if you want to do it immediately, then you can click an resync component. It's more beneficial example in case of we are going to change some of storage policy, right? Okay, proactive rebalance, it is something that VSAN keep on doing hourly exercise to keep an balance of, if in case any host is going more than 80%, it's going to be, balance its components within another available ESXi host. However, we can do an proactive rebalancing as well. So it's something automatic exercise, you don't need to be worried about it. Okay, so clone repair time means that whatever VSAN just understand the components in the 2 stages, absent and degrade. Absent component is it always consider as a completely component failure. For example, any HB storage adapter failure, your cassette drive failure, your entire disk failure. So that consider as an absent component. So for any absent component, VSAN immediately start to build the storage component on another host which are participating in this VSAN cluster. Absent means 1 HB goes down by XYZ region. There is no possible it will come back. This host is completely crashed by XYZ region because you don't put its maintenance mode by VSAN cluster. So absent, it will immediately start to rebuild the storage component of another ESXi host. Where we say degrade, VSAN consider these degraded component like it understand somewhere my host is in maintenance mode by XYZ reason. So it will wait for 60 minutes to come back that particular host by XYZ. I mean, maybe in maintenance mode, maybe it's down for some time, maybe just a network connectivity down, it's not physically down. It considered as degraded component. So if any of components which is more than 60 minutes not come back for that time, then again your VSAN cluster will start to rebuild its component for rest of available physical host and consider that component is in absent state. However, this degrade time can be increased or decreased on the basis of your cluster setting. So this is how my VSAN cluster identify and sense the neighbor relationship, how it is down or it is in absent state or it is in degraded state. Degraded is something it goes for some time, it will be back, so that I should wait. Absent is something it will never back, it is died due to physical failure, hardware failure, host failure, HBA failure, disk failure. All these consider as an kind of absent states. Okay, so these are something failure events. Completely failure, right? Degrade, the data copy is permanently lost. Okay, data copy is known to be lost and not expected to come back.
Yeah, one question actually.
Yeah.
When we talk about component, so component is basically your data, or that is your like the physical the device that could be as you just
component is further segregation of your object.
Okay.
If I am writing here, like for example, I am writing here 10 MB file. So this could be a VMDK. This will place on VMDK, right? Further, this 10 MB is going to create simple. to 10 MB data. So these are my components.
Okay, then when we talk about FTT1 and FTT2, right, so where we can see that is one component failure in FTT1, RAID 1, and FTT2, right, RAID 5, where we can, the tolerate two
Again,
components.
RAID 5 also support FTT1, right? But yeah, in
Okay.
case of its eraser coding RAID 6, it support FTT2.
Okay, so in that case, the component which we can, have two failure, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that
correct.
could be,
On the
yeah,
basis
okay.
of storage policy, what we have applied.
Okay, so that is not something your physical, the things like.
No. Component is a logical object. Your
Okay,
object is further segregated into component and stored on different ESXi hosts.
got it. So that is something the on top of your ESXi physical of components where we can
Component
have
is
tolerate.
yeah, correct. Just another definition of your data, which you are going to store on the top of physical disks on ESXi host, right? And whatever storage policy we are talking about here, those are not directly applying on your physical disks. Okay, those policies are applying on your component, and your component is getting written on the top of disks on the basis of those policies. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so here is again rebuilding the component. So rebuilding, it means if any component is being absent more than 60 minutes, it will start to rebuild. Just a simple example here. If it will feel this is considered as degraded, it will not come back. So what it will do, your VSAN is pretty smart enough. It will not keep it as it is. It will start to rebuild because it need to create your RAID as an healthy. So to make an healthy environment, it will create another replica on another available ESXi host. Correct? So if any component is absent, it will wait for 60 minutes. It will wait, and if it's considered as degraded, degraded means it will start immediately. Okay. So simple. Degraded is some direct failure. Absent is something he will come back after some time. He will wait, right?
So Kuldeep, what will happen if, for example, the host 2 is broken and once it will came back, so again it will reconfigure the SAN or something, or
It will
just
consider
add
it
the
as kind of new host.
new host and it will configure it with the existing policy, right?
With the existing policy, and it will onboard this as in kind of new candidate. New candidate, just like of a fresh.
Okay.
Then it means to re-add this host, we have to clean the disk as well, because
Yeah.
suppose the host went down unexpectedly first time, and so the disk of that host might have the data, existing data.
Yeah.
And
You have to clean up.
after the rebuilding, it came back, then the disks might still have that data, so that need to be cleaned before adding it to the cluster. Am I right?
Cool. Yeah, true. That's true. Okay, so this is how it going to handling the failure. So there are some examples like cache device failure. So what happens if any host cache device is directly failure? So it will consider as degrade, and it will start to rebuild the data on another host. So that's why best practices say if in this particular host there is single disk group, recommendation is always to go with 2 disk group, right? Why? Because at least within 1 disk group my data is not available, but at least my second disk group SSD is still available, and I am safe on some of the part, on some of the side, right? So that's why recommendation is go with 2 or more disk group on each and every host to avoid a single cache disk failure. If I'm using an architecture with single data store architecture, if my cache disk failure, all my capacity will be down that time, right? So better to create multiple disk groups. Okay, so this is another. So these all are the different examples where we can consider degraded state or the absent state. Well, to replace or upgrade the device. So if in case we need to replace any hardware failure, place the host in maintenance mode, evacuate that, because there is an hardware failure, evacuate always. fix up your hardware issue and replace it with the new hardware, bring it back, and yeah, if new hardware is detected, rescan all the storage and add additional disk. It's a simple process you do in your ESXi in a traditional cluster environment as well, right? Okay, when we say scalable architecture, it means that, for an example, within data store, you are using only 3 capacity drive. Now you want to extend it up, so you can scale up easily. How? Maybe you can add additional disk in existing disk group. That's also possible. Or maybe you can create additional disk group. That's also possible. But this scalability should be homogeneous for each and every host. For an example, if primary host, I am going to create one more disk group, then rest of the host also you need to create same amount of disk size and disk group as well, right? This is what is called scale up. And when we say scale out, it means that anytime you can onboard the new physical ESXi host with same amount of disk, same amount of available anyway disk group that you need to be identify when you will onboard. But yeah, definitely that should have capacity on that. How many hosts you can go? It's an vSphere limit. You can go up to 64 nodes. Okay. Now, one interesting question. You add one ESXi host, but unfortunately that ESXi host don't have any disks to be participate in disk group or on VSAN data store. Will that host still can be the part of VSAN? Answer is yes, that can be. Only the things, he should have the VSAN VM kernel port. If in case any host does not have any disk, no disk is available, but still it have VM kernel port, he would be able to access the VSAN data store. Only the thing, he is a bagger. He cannot participate anything, but he can take the advantage, right? Okay, so most of the alarms and all that's all inbuilt in your vCenter environment itself. Okay, well, one more interesting thing, when you are going to create and establish your vSAN environment, fault domain. So fault domain actually going to protect you from a rack aware failure. For example, a simple example here, you could see you are planning a 12 node ESXi cluster, probably 12 node ESXi cluster in your environment, and you want to protect within your data center any rack aware failure. Boss, I want, if in case this complete rack will got failure, my data will still be safe. That's also possible. How? First of all, physically you will place your ESXi hosts in separate racks, rack 1, rack 2, and rack 3, right? But how your vSAN cluster get to know? Actually, you have split them, because for vSAN it is a complete cluster. It is a single cluster for vSAN, right? So by configuring the fault domain, what you can do is, okay, this is here. What a fault domain means is, within vSAN cluster itself, if you will create, like for an example, fault domain 1, and you are adding host 1 to 4, it means that now you are segregating this. You have create fault domain 2, and you have add host number 5 to 8 there, and you have another fault domain, you have add there 9 to 12. So it means that now your vSAN cluster can identify logically these 4 hosts part of rack 1, these 4 hosts are part of rack 2, and these 4 hosts are part of rack 3. Until unless you will not do this segregation, this fault domain creation within your vSAN cluster, your cluster will not be able to identify. You have split these physical nodes across different racks. That's how you have to design the fault domain. Now, second thing, you would say, Kuldeep, that's fine, yeah, I have created fault domain racks and all, my cluster is able to identify. Now question arises, how my cluster will get to know ki this completely will get failure, how this can manage. So along with fault domain, something we have to keep in mind, when we design the fault domain, the storage will be automatically protected in that way. If one rack will get failure by XYZ reason, rack A, rack B or rack C, rest of the 2 rack can manage the storage easily, because my VSAN cluster is smart enough. Now he knows overall 12 nodes are split into 3 racks, and how I am going to distribute the storage around these 3 racks, how I'm going to distribute the data. But now question comes on storage side, that's okay. But how my CPU and memory will be identified in that case? So in that case, on cluster admission control policy, as per this design, I have to set failure to tolerate on cluster level admission control. Hope you are aware. Typically we set is 1 host failure, 2 host failure. In this example, I will set 4 host failure. Then only you will be making a fully designed for a local cluster that you can tolerate the entire rack failure. You got my logic? Anyone? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we need to get the fault domain, if in case a customer is looking for a design where a customer is looking for the rack aware failure, maybe in this example, there could be 16 node across 4 racks. That's also possible. There could be 24 nodes across 6 racks, 4, 4, 4, 6. It could be any number, but somewhere we have to reserve the resources. We have to reserve the number of nodes on the basis of available nodes. That is in particular one rack. So admission control policy we have to design in that way. So fault domain is another concept within VSAN where customer is looking for protect his data for entire rack failure. So in this case, whatever nodes you have designing, anyway it's a designing for enterprise, it's not for a small environment. Customer is designing 24 nodes. Probably you could say, boss, just design these 24 nodes in 6 racks so that you can easily tolerate the 4 nodes failure for per rack. So you will split it into 4, 4, 4, 4 per rack. Correct? Okay, that's why I tell you your VSAN is pretty smart enough. When you will create the fault domain, it will automatically identify where I need to write the data and where I need to maintain the witness. It will not always write the data. Like for example, RAID 1, maybe simple example. If just assume there is no fault tolerance, there is no fault domain, it could be like this. But now it is fault domain. Now your smartness of your VSAN cluster is, if it's a fault domain, I am writing some data FTT1 with this RAID 1, it will go like that. Here, here, witness here, maybe here, here, here. It will split across the fault domain so that it can protect you for the entire rack failure. Correct? Cool feature, interesting one.
Yep.
Yeah, so now let's talk about a little bit on a stretch cluster. So a cluster can be stretched across multiple availability zone as well. That's a feature of VSAN. Again, that's an interesting feature of VSAN. A single VSAN cluster can be stretched across multiple availability zone. But for that, there is some specific requirement from VMware. What you need to configure the witness. For that, you have to configure site 1, site 2, and a third site that's called as an witness site, where you have to create an witness appliance. That's an virtual appliance. But for that, there would be local routers for each site. All these 3 routers should talk with each other. Here, this is my network environment. Between site 1 and site 2, a network latency should be always less than 5 milliseconds. Keep in mind, 5 milliseconds. My network latency should be less than 5 milliseconds always. And between my data sites and my witness site, it should be less than or equals to 200 milliseconds. Okay. Now, what are the advantages I am getting from a storage cluster? So stretch cluster, sorry. So stretch cluster is an enhanced form what we just talked. you can achieve with fault domain rack aware failure. So with the stretch cluster, you can protect your entire data center against the entire site failure. How it is, how it's possible, right? Underline, you have a single cluster, you have a single VSAN data store, okay? But still, like for example, there is 8 nodes I am using, 4 nodes I am hosting site 1, 4 nodes I am hosting site 2, correct? Probably you are seeing here fault domain 1, fault domain 2 here. So to create an stretch cluster, primary requirement is my latency. Secondary requirement is for each and every ESXi host I am going to take on here, or appliance, there would be a separate VM kernel will create for this VSAN replica. That's a traffic for VSAN witness. A VM kernel will create for VSAN witness, so that they can talk to third site here. Okay, first requirement is my bandwidth. Second is we have to create a additional VM kernel port that is going to talk with the witness site. Why witness site? Witness is your witness for to aware you with the site level of failure, how its site level of failure will happen. So when I am going to create an stretch cluster, initially my cluster would be a simple cluster, but first thing what I need to do, first thing is routing between witness site and resolve site, latency. I have to create VM kernel. Then I have to split my host into fault domain 1 and fault domain 2. Third thing, I have to identify the witness appliance name in my actual cluster. Then it's going to create the entire stretch cluster for me. Now, question comes in picture. Boss, that's fine. You have created stretch cluster. That is fine. We are satisfied with it. But now you tell us how it's going to protect us from the failure. Okay, from the failure. Well, it's going to protect us from the failure. Like this is my site 1. This is my site 2. This is my witness site. So this is site 1, site 2. Now, how it's going to protect me from the failure? Network and everything is already on the place. So whenever we create a stretch cluster, it always use 2 type of storage policy. PFTT1. What? PFTT. Primary failure to tolerate. What it say? It say, boss, how my data will be written across these 2 sites. Across these 2 sites. So I will take primary failure tolerance to FTT1, RAID 1 in this example. It means that whatever data I am going to write, any of the VM, and as an end user, whatever data I am going to write in any of the VM, that's going here as well as here. It means that it is replicating as per this policy, FTT1, RAID 1. In this way, I am going to protect my VM data. If this site got failure, still I am safe here. That's fine. Agree? There is again another set of policy, that is secondary failure to tolerate. It means that how secondary failure to tolerate is moreover parallel to the previous policy what we read. How you are protecting your data locally. It means that suppose you say, boss, for locally, I am going to create again FTT1 RAID. It could be any RAID 1, RAID 5, whatever you want. Let's, for example, you say this RAID 1. It means that finally, whatever data I am writing here, like for example, this is 10 GB data. First thing, it will create 10 GB here. It will create 10 GB here. Site aware failure. Second policy is going to protect you locally. It means that it's going to create one more replica here, 10 GB and 10 GB. In this stretch cluster, whatever data I am writing, as per these policies, if I am writing 10 GB, it's going to consume how much? How much? 40 GB.
40 GB.
Right? So whenever we are going to plan an stretch cluster, reduce the 50% capacity, because 50% capacity you are going to use for protection. So it's depend user to user, customer to customer. Probably they will use an active site, they will use an standby site. It means that whatever VM I'm writing here, for example, today I am running here 100 VMs. Each VM have 50 GB. So it's going to be 5000 GB of storage. So automatically my 5000 GB replica is being created here, and same amount of compute, my storage, my ESXi asked already available. So if today's date, if any failure will occur here, they will just simply restart on secondary site. In this case, in this way, I can protect the entire site failure. So whenever we use stretch cluster, admission control policy, always use 50% compute reservation. You aware from where we set the admission control? HA setting, admission control will always 50%, because 50% it will always reserve for the failure. Okay. So another question can come in mind, Kuldeep. Still can I use my both site as active? Active means is I want to protect some data from this site to this site, and I want to protect some data from this site to this site. Absolutely. Why not? You can use both site as an active. It means that this is my VM for end user. This is the VM, correct? Right? So if I'm saying I'm running this VM here, so for this VM, this is the active site. There is another VM I want to run on this site. So what will happen? So whatever is here, there is a local copy for protection, and there is remote copy as well. Same way for this VM, there is local copy, there is remote copy, and there is 2 local copy. Agree or not? So in this active, what it means? Parallelly, my both side, for this VM, this is active, this is standby. For this VM, this is active, this is standby. That's also possible. End of the day, you will get 50% of CPU and memory for use. Okay. It's all depend upon your choice, how you want to use that. Both side can be active, both side can be standby. Now, I ask you one question, guys, because you all are masters in VMware. How I will decide if I will create a VM here? How I will decide this VM will run here or this VM will run here? In my vCenter, this is a single cluster, correct? But how I will decide this VM will go on this set of ESXi or on this set of ESXi? Anyone? Because
Yes.
end of the day, there is a single vCenter, there is a single cluster.
So if you want to run any particular VM on any particular ESXi host, then you have to
Site,
go with
yeah.
the
How I will decide this will run on this site only?
anti-affinity rules you're talking about.
Absolutely. We have to create some affinity rules there.
Affinity rules.
Yeah. That's an important thing. Otherwise, आप VM create करोगे और बाद में आप ढूंढते रह जाओगे. VM किधर? Anyway, VM is there, but you will not able to identify कि भाई VM इस host पे चलना चाहिए, इस host पे चलना चाहिए, right? If customer will say you, boss, मेरे को पूरा active standby plan चाहिए, and my all VMs should run always on active site, then always you create some affinity rules, product VMs, dev VMs, DB VMs, and push those VMs on that particular groups. Correct? This is how we do the plan of stretch cluster. But stretch cluster always there is 2 set of policies. One is for across the site failure and second is for local site failure. Okay, so these all numbers with respect to witness. What are these? The size of my witness host. It's all depend like. So a witness appliance is a kind of mini ESXi VMs. Somewhere you will put an ESXi host and a virtual appliance inside it, and somewhere you have to do some level 3 of routing between them. right? So that's what is the requirement. That's what we discussed. Okay. So now let us see some failure scenarios.
So Kuldeep, my question is this a recommended way? Can we use this in a practical environment? Because here, what I'm suspecting that if we have to store only 10 GB of space and it is consuming more than 400 GB, it means 400.
No, 10 GB is going for a, no, that was just example. That would be 40 GB.
Yeah. So I'm telling, means 400% space is overutilized. So is this a recommended way?
Well, for this, there is two things here comes in picture. Let me take somewhere new slide. So for optimizing of storage in this example, so my across the site will always be the across the site will always be, if you want site aware failure, then that's mandatory. Your PFTT1 should be FTT1 RAID 1. Otherwise, your storage component will not be replicated. Correct?
So,
But
one
now,
question here.
Sir, just allow me 5 seconds.
Okay.
SFTT for locally, it's not mandatory for you. You go always RAID 1. You go for eraser coding as well for storage optimization. So locally, you can go for eraser coding as well for your space optimization. Correct, Amit?
But I think the overutilization is still 300%, at least if you are using eraser.
But you are getting, absolutely. But
still
you are
it is
getting
300%.
advantages here.
Yeah, definitely we are getting advantage. But my question is this a practical approach?
Yeah, why not? Where people want the minimum RPO and RTO in case of they are planning some,
it means we are talking
DR
about
solution across 2 sites.
Mission critical applications.
Absolutely. Stretch is always for the priority 1 applications. That's the use
Mission
case.
critical applications can be put in such environment.
Absolutely right. So you can make an stretch cluster for them, and for rest of them, you can put in a local standalone cluster, right? Where you are looking for minimum RPO and RTO, and you don't want to invest any kind of DR solution, kind of SRM or another things you are using. So it's good because nothing is being changing here. You don't need to trigger any DR or something like that. It will sense the failure. Failure is something, there is different scenarios that we are going to talk in upcoming slides, how it's going to failure. Right?
Okay, so it means we can say this is a replacement of SRM as well in it.
Yeah, if you want to use as complete, if you want to use it, yeah, why not?
Okay. It means there is no requirement to configure a SRM for a particular.
No, not at all.
And by default, it is working in that
as a DR solution for you.
Right.
Correct. So it's all depend like what is the customer requirement. If they are, maybe they have some critical workload, they go ahead and they can put an stretch cluster, and maybe they have non-critical, they can make an standalone and they can make SRM and they can make as a kind of DR solution for non-critical one, where they don't want, too much higher or too much lower RPO and RTO. Yeah, Rupak sir, actually you were asking something, sorry.
In a stress cluster, where should we keep our witness node?
Witness will always prefer to third site, and there would be an L3 routing between all these.
Okay, it may be any appliance or any ESX host?
It is a virtual appliance. It is moreover kind of a virtual OVA that is not a complete ESXi. That is a mini form of ESXi.
So for the third side, we require one more ESX host. Am I right?
Absolutely right. You should have any third party site where you have anywhere any vSphere environment XYZ. You will just deploy this appliance in a form of OVA. Then there would be one VM kernel port will configure to talk with the site 1 and site 2, and all these there should be an L3 routing available. between all these.
Okay.
three.
And if the witness node is down, so what will be the impact on my VSAN cluster?
Yeah, if witness will goes down, then it's called an split brain situation. It means that whatever what running where, it will keep on running. There would not be any failure will trigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why this witness node is required?
Yeah. So witness is, yeah, that's the question of your, that's the answer of your question. Sorry. So, well, stretch is maintaining the heartbeat and it's observing the activeness of these sites, primary or secondary, are properly active. By XYZ reason, if witness will hear, I am not getting any heartbeat from secondary, because 30 seconds by default heartbeat time, it will not get 30, 35, 3 consecutive heartbeat. It will consider it, because witness is the decision maker somewhere. It's a quorum. The decision makers, well, shall we initiate the failure or not? By XYZ reason, it will not hear any heartbeat from here. So it will consider its failure and it will trigger the failure of the VMs. It will restart all the VMs from primary to secondary side. But as I said, condition, remember 50% ratio should be reserved, so that easily my VMs can be start here. Storage replica is already available as per storage policy and sufficient. Yeah.
The question is here that for 30 seconds, it didn't get any response from the primary side and it fell over to the secondary side. All the VMs are up at secondary
30
side.
seconds, 3 consecutive heartbeats, 90 seconds actually.
Okay. So when it bring up the VMs at the secondary side and suddenly the
Primary come back.
side come back. So in this case,
primary comeback, it's all depend upon your again affinity rule. If there is a rule of this one, it will not trigger the it will not trigger the failure actually. It will not be a restart, but your VMs will, if there was affinity rule, your VM will start moving to the primary side nodes without any restart. It's a simple host to host migration. Okay, so that's an example like what we are looking for. If any of the sites will got failure, then HA will trigger the restart of the VMs on the active site. Okay, if single host is failure locally, then it's a local failover. Okay, it's a local failover of VMs as per my local storage policy and my HA admission control policy. If a witness failure, communication loss, 5 consecutive heartbeat between witness and data sites, then witness is failed, then it will consider as a split brain situation. Whatever VM will running where, it will keep on running. There would not be any failover event happen. Okay, and if a network failure, if it's detected by the site, then yeah, definitely it would be a restart between primary to secondary site.
How it will go to primary side if the network is failure?
Underline it's a network failure, but it will detect and it will restart HA.
HA will trigger for this.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway, site failure is again a HA restart. That's it. Underline it's a single cluster. But fault domain is something bring in picture. Fault domain is identifying, yes, I am not having any connectivity for that particular site. So now I should trigger a restart. Okay, so these are the different failover scenario. There could be some local, there could be site aware, or there could be some witness aware failure. Okay, so from virtual health services, VSAN, it's not only the things what we did. VSAN also have some of another services, kind of performance services and all. So whatever options we are taking, that is as per the compatibility guide, the nodes availability, configuration. So a lot of providers are available. Lots of hardware providers from the networks are available. Okay, for VSAN. All flash, disk group design, that you understand now how we'll plan it. Okay, capacity and cache drive, that why what we discussed, like cache should be always at least 10% as compared to your capacity drive. Network IO control, that's one of the important factor where we are using the shared network bandwidth. for different type of traffics, that's always to give and dedicated 50% of network bandwidth to your VSAN traffic. I hope you are aware, like from VDS, from where we set the network IO control, right? Because the most of the heaviest traffic that moves around the host between for the storage, that is that's the VSAN one, and for rest of them you can do less number of. What are these values actually? These
And it's recommended to have separate NIC for the VSAN network, am I right?
Rupak, so there could be two configuration. Like within these two NICs, if we talk about here, it's all depend again upon design to design. Let me just here. It could be active standby. For VSAN, there could be one NIC active, rest of another NIC is standby, and for rest of the traffic, another NIC could be active and standby. Probably you could see in this picture. Second one is active for VSAN and standby for rest of the node, and the first one is active for rest of the traffic and standby for VSAN. So either we can go with this architecture, or if in case we are using both are active in this case, so that point of time we have to fix the we have to reserve the bandwidth from NIOC for this VSAN traffic. Clear?
Yeah, got it. So no, I'm just saying about if we separate the data network for the virtual machine, so that will be better, am I right?
Data network, you mean here? Okay, yeah. Correct. That's what this that's what this is showing, right? For virtual machine, my active NIC is NIC 1. There could be confusion for 2 NICs or maybe confusion for 4 NICs. It's all depend upon environment to environment, right? So maybe we can take 2 NICs configuration for overall this configuration and 2 NICs separately for VSAN.
Yeah, because if we reserve 50% of our NIC bandwidth for VSAN, then obviously it might affect the virtual
machine. Yes, right. So that's why with this 2 NIC 10 GB configuration, we have dedicated one active NIC for VSAN. For rest of the traffic dotted line, it means this is a standby. But if in case this NIC get failure by XYZ region, in this scenario, somehow we have to manage all these traffic from this one. But again, we have to keep priority for VSAN traffic, right? Okay, so that's what I want to discuss with you for this today's session. And what I would request you, I'm turned on one lab. So probably you guys are aware like how we will access this lab. It's a simple, just you will type labs.hol.vmware. You will just log in there by any of the ID, could be your official ID or non-official ID. And there is a lot of VSAN labs are available. One of them is, okay, let me open from beginning so that you will understand it easily. lab.vmware.hol, click here. And from this menu, you will just type VSAN. You will get a lot of labs, but don't do all. First, you will start from, maybe you can do it this one, getting started. VSAN, getting started lab. Yeah, you can start from here. And the three things are main. First, what is the build prerequisites for VSAN? Second thing is the storage policies and all, and what kind of daily operations we can manage, and how we can onboard and offboard new ESXi host in case we need to extend our cluster. And the fourth one is its operation and services. So I can type you this lab. This is for your homework only. Not sure where this chat option will come. Where is the chat? Yeah. So just play this lab, play around this lab, and yeah, spend some time. And I'm going to share with this slide deck with you guys. And from Q&A perspective, but whatever we have discussed, most of the Q&A will be around that, but I want you guys to spend some time on these hands-on labs so that you will get more clarity and more visibility what's happening inside. Just click at least available all the options in VSAN, what we can do and all, right? So this is approximately 400, 500 pages lab that's going to give you enhanced, hands-on experience. This is the one. So please, I'm requesting you again and again, spend some time. Okay, that's already I have turned on. Hey, it's come on back. Let me close it.
Kuldeep, can we get registered ourselves by our personal ID, or do we
Yeah,
need-
anything you can do. It's
Actually, it is
it's a
speaking
freeware
for
labs. It's freeware
Yeah.
labs. Any official email ID is not required for these. If you are not registered so far, go there and just register yourself with your personal email ID as well. Not a problem.
No, actually, when I'm just trying to new user registration, it is asking about email ID and company name.
Okay. Even with your personal ID, that's not a problem. You just give. You can put company name, na IT Maverick.
Okay.
Anything. It is just for formality purpose, right?
Okay.
By any chance, if you will not get, guys, this is the lab actually. So just play around this lab over all day. You will get a lot of clarity what we have discussed today, what we have done. A lot of definitions are available here, right? If in case you will get any challenge, no problem. I'll share my ID and you can play around that. Okay. But the thing is, we should be pretty much aware what is VSAN, how do we create initial level of cluster VSAN, how will perform day 2 operations, how will configure storage policies in VSAN, what are the different type of policies, right? So that's all available in this lab.
Sure, sir.
I'll not take your too much time because it's already Saturday and
Yeah, Kuldeep, can you ping that link on the WhatsApp chat?
yeah. Even I put in this meeting conversation. Yeah.
Okay, it will disappear once we disconnect. Just ping in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, I'll try to take it in WhatsApp as well. So you play around this, okay? And post that, I'll have some Q&A, question and answer. I'll share with you guys. And tomorrow we are having another session that's around on VxRail. So
Okay.
don't think yourself now you are expert on VxRail as well, because somewhere VxRail is using in backend VSAN as an HCI storage, but there is the way of working is bit different as compared to the traditional VSAN environment we do, right? There is a lot of automations things in VxRail that we need to understand and how VxRail leverage this VSAN capability, right? That we are going to.
So Kuldeep, one question here. I'm just looking for one of the flexibility. For example, I have 4 to 5 cluster, and for each cluster we have VSAN data store. Okay. And I need to present that the VSAN data store from one cluster to another cluster. So is it possible in this scenario? Because in traditional fiber channel we can present that.
That's possible in latest latest version of VSAN. That's we say as an HCI mesh. That's one of the features of VSAN now that can be present to the blank set of nodes.
Because in production sometimes what happen, customer need to move the VMs from one cluster to another cluster or from one site to another site.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, we and they did that, and they don't need any downtime. So in that scenario, we need a shared resources, shared LAN, so that it can be presented to multiple LAN, and after we migrate, we can just reclaim the LAN from that cluster. So in that scenario, in VSAN, if we have a 5 cluster and VSAN storage data store is need to be present to another cluster. So is it it is possible in the new features? Am I right?
Yeah, VSAN HCI mesh that we call it.
So there is a new
7.0 onwards that is supported.
okay.
And yeah, but for that you have to configure some basic VSAN settings as well
Okay.
on a target node.
I think VSAN is good, but I think still there are some limitations as compared to other storage.
Absolutely, kind
Might
of.
be traditional storage, but for most of the customer, for example, I'm just supporting here in our environment, VSAN is not feasible.
Absolutely, it's not a best use case for each and every customer. So the customer where we are preferring, we can go with hybrid mode as well. The nodes which are VSAN ready node, so we can present as a traditional SAN along with VSAN if we are using some kind of HBA or that, right? Because probably some of the environment where customer is looking for is still their cluster environment for RDM, performance agnostic and all. So yeah, along with VSAN.
And what about the backup solution we can use with the VSAN?
Backup method, there is no restriction actually. Whatever is with the traditional one, you can go ahead and this. Okay, you are looking for target storage VSAN for backup solution, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think so. Anyone is preferring so far as a target storage for VSAN.
Okay.
Because for making as a data, for making data domain only for putting the storage, anyway, you can put as a target, but it's a costly solution for you, right? Because you are consuming a lot of compute part as well, right? For making VSAN clusters and all. So it's not a feasible use case to go with to put your backup on VSAN based clusters.
Yeah, I'm just exploring what are the feasibility here. So if you need to design anything for a customer, so you can just put the recommendation that you can use this or this.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like in your case where you say I'm giving you one example for one customer where we have deployed VCF itself, right? But it's still for VSAN, they are not getting the level of performance they were using for a SQL cluster. So now what they are planning is they are extending their storage. They just putting some HBA controller there, extending that storage in SAN and presenting that as an RDM in a hybrid mode as well.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, VSAN data store is not going to disturb your SAN fabric altogether. Even you can go ahead and you can do parallel, right? But yeah, definitely like getting mature day by day from performance perspective, like SSD drive is available, multiple vendors, multiple champions are in the market, and different kind of, I would say, they are queue depth or something like that. They are coming with the enhanced version. So it's replacing.
Yeah, even in our environment, what we face generally, there are some high database, might be SQL or Oracle. They generally need very high level of tier at the storage level, because if you provide a general tier, so they complaining that there is a performance
VSAN is
issue.
not. Yeah, absolutely. That's these are some complaint. So where they are looking for very high performance workload. So, but it's not like that. It's not only we cannot use, but we can use some of the cases like VSAN is supported DB as well, kind of exchange or another applications also. But yeah, definitely if there is some critical and they have already the storage heavy from the back end or the legacy one, then it would not be recommendation that they go for the VSAN. Maybe they can go separate cluster for SAN, or maybe they can go for a hybrid approach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you very much, Kuldeep, for your session. It's a good session. I think everyone liked.
Yeah, we believe so. So please spend some time on this HOL for today. And yeah, tomorrow, even in first 15-20 minutes, we will try to resolve all the queries from today's session as well. And after hands-on, and tomorrow we will touch upon Delhi MCB still. If times will allow, we will touch a bit part of VCF as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's connect tomorrow at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Kuldeep, will you sharing this slide?
Absolutely. I'm going to share this slide and video will be with you guys also.
Yeah,
Recording as well, sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye.
Bye-bye.